I have a question to start with, and there will be some other questions as we go through. But it's a question that's maybe a little bit risky to ask, because typically when you start a sermon, you want it the aspect. That's why a lot of times preachers will tell a joke, because you want everyone to come in unison, and you want everyone to be in agreement. Okay, so usually you don't start with something that just kind of scares everyone and then, okay, we lost everything. So this is a little bit risky, this question. But why do we so often find ourselves being selfish? Why are we greedy? At least at times. Why do we have this determination to be our own God? That was a little risky, right? Until we think about it. Are we selfish at times? Are people selfish? Sure. I think there's only one answer. There really only can be one answer, because we believe by so doing, life is going to be better, right? We wouldn't be selfish, say, I want to be selfish because I'm going to make life worse for myself. You know, it's got to be that the only answer is, I think things will be better if I look out for myself, okay? As we hear things in this dog-eat-dog world, okay? Nobody else is going to be looking out for me. I got to look out for myself. And so when we think about it, we do it because we think life's going to be better. But you know, it's not a new struggle, okay? We start in the Bible with Genesis, the beginning of so much. That's why it's important to take time in reading Genesis, because it's the beginnings. The beginning of creation, the beginning of mankind, beginning of marriage, of sin, and so much. We see the beginnings. And as we look back in chapter 3 in Genesis, we see the kind of those that are there. We see the serpent, we see Adam, we see Eve. And the serpent comes to tempt them. And here's a paraphrase, kind of what the serpent was saying. Don't you think life would be better if you were in charge? You decide what's right and wrong. You decide what's good and evil. You'd be in charge of your own life. And so the implication of that temptation to Adam and Eve is the idea that life would be better if you were the one in charge. Is that true? Didn't work out very well then, right? So is it true? And that's what I want us to talk about this morning. We're looking in Proverbs. We've looked at Proverbs 1, 2. Now we're at 3, and this is where we're going to end today. Even though 1, 2, 3, and 4 really go together to set the whole aspect of skillful living and of wisdom, what that means. But I've tried to incorporate chapter 4 into 2 and 3, helping us to see those thoughts, because they're also in there as well. So I want to go with the progression, because chapter 3 has a lot there. And so we're going to highlight some things. And so trying to go with the progression of what we've looked at so far. 2 weeks ago, when we looked at chapter 1, we were looking at the need for wisdom. And remember, wisdom for the Hebrew isn't a bunch of knowledge, okay? It's not a lot of things, because again, we are taught from the Greek system, not the Hebrew. Because we are taught you get a lot of things here, that is knowledge and wisdom, and then you take a test, and now I know things, okay? We regurgitate things, is what it's about. And that's not the Hebrew thought. The Hebrew thought is its experience of life. So if you were living this out within your life, you are wise. If you know it and it's not being shown in your life, you are foolish. Okay? That's their thinking. Pretty good thinking. And then chapter 2 we looked at last week. Okay, because of wisdom, do you want it? Then you have to pursue it. Okay? It has to be pursued. We aren't born with wisdom, right? It's not something we wake up, okay, I'm whatever years old and now I'm wise. It doesn't take place that way. There's nothing magic to it. So we have to decide, doesn't matter. If it matters, we need to pursue it. And it's my desire this morning to talk about the rewards of wisdom. Okay? So if you want it, pursue it, but then there's benefits. Okay? There's benefits for wisdom. So here's another question. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth all the hard work that it takes to be wise? Verse 1. It says, my son, or we would say my children, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Now this is God talking, okay? My children, don't forget my teaching, and let your heart keep my commandments. So it's not just know it, it's deep in you. It's in your heart. The discussion we had last week in chapter 2 is when you pursue wisdom, it leads to relationship with God. Okay? That you will grow stronger and stronger in that relationship. And as you grow in your relationship with God, you see some things change. It doesn't seem like I'm the person I used to be. Our heart starts to change. Our soul starts to change. Because it's relationship. And those things that God says, these are my commandments, this is what I want, because all these things are really the character of who God is, it starts defining you. And it comes from the inside out. It is seen in skillful living, but it's only skillful living because it's taking place on the inside. As we looked at last week, when we're being tempted isn't the time to try to figure out what I'm going to do. It's to know it beforehand. And we can know it because of relationship. We can't take time to Google it, right? When temptation comes. We need to have it become a part of us. And in our relationship with God, we see that becomes more and more a part as we journey with God. Again, it's not instantaneous. It grows and it starts defining us. So that's verse 1. What is the reward? What is the reward of this? Verse 2. For lengths of days and years of life and peace that will be added to you. So here are two rewards. The length of your life and also peace will be added to you. Now this gets a little bit crazy, okay? Because I haven't shared with you yet, even though you probably know. Remember, Proverbs are not promises, okay? If they were promises, we would come, there's promises, there's Psalms. They're not promises, they are Proverbs. They are general truths, okay? You could be very faithful following the Lord God and get hit by a bus, okay? They are general truths. And so the idea here isn't really talking about how many days you have here upon this earth, that if I'm really faithful with God, if I have a quiet time every day, if I go to church, I'm going to live to be 100. That's not what it's saying here, okay? The length of days. What does it mean? It basically means that your days will be good. You'll have a lot of good days. Have you ever had those days that you say, man, I wish this moment would not end? And it comes from all sorts of things. Sometimes it may be you're standing at Horseshoe Falls and looking at Niagara. You go, man, I wish this could just last. Or maybe you're standing on one of the mountains in the Rockies or in the Smokies and say, man, I wish this could just last. But also as we follow God, there are times when you worship, you go, man, I wish this could just stay. What I'm experiencing now, I wish this would be all the time. And this is what he's talking about. It's a lot more the quality within those years. Okay? Is what he's telling us. I wish this would never end. And as we follow God, a reward is we will have more and more and more of those times. A lot of good things happen. Things that are meaningful. So in other words, fearing the Lord and keeping his commandments will create more and more of these moments. And it gives us a glimpse into the world that's ahead, right? when it's all going to be that way. That, man, I hope this never ends when we get to heaven, and it won't, okay? And how neat that is. Now, there's the second part, because it's not just talking about time and quality of time. It says peace will be added to you. Now, for the Hebrew, the word peace, it's shalom. Shalom. Shalom is difficult to define. Usually we just say shalom means peace, and we go on. Oh, it's much deeper than that. Shalom. It goes deeper than just quietness within life, absence of conflict. It's more than that. And also remember, as we've looked at already, that when you look at the Proverbs, they are not just individualistic, they are for community, okay? So he is talking about the aspect that when you do this, the community will have great moments that you hope never ends, but also there will be peace within the community. See, we live in a time for about 150 years, we have been taught through a humanistic perspective that everything's about the individual. One reason why we're having trouble in this country, okay? We're thinking about the individual instead of the community. And we've looked at some of this already in the Proverbs. But it's the idea the Proverbs aren't just about me. It's really about us. Okay, it's about us. The life together that we have in community. So shalom is that same thing. It's not that I just have shalom, but we have shalom. And God has always created a group to help shalom to take place. That's what the Hebrews, the Jewish people, were about. That they were to have this relationship with God, that they would have shalom, and then they would help the rest of the world to have shalom, right? They were to be a beacon. We have a group now which is called the church, Christians, that we are to experience the shalom of God, and we are to be a beacon to help everybody else to experience shalom as well. So how do you define shalom? It carries the idea of wholeness, fullness, prosperity, peace. So you would probably simply define it as mutual flourishing. That in society, everybody flourishes. Because ideally, God wants everyone to keep his commandments, right? Everyone. It's not a select few. And so then this takes place, the outflow within everyone's lives. Creating this. Isn't shalom what most people want? Even you hear it in the Mideast. If you listen to a Jewish person, it's shalom. If it's an Arab, it's shalom. Okay, that is their greeting. Okay, it's a big difference. Be careful when you're talking to someone which one you say, because you won't have peace. But it's this idea. We want it. If we had a lot of people within our community come together and we talk, we would agree about certain things within our community. We would want our community to flourish, wouldn't we? Everybody, pretty well. You might get a few people that want to be obstinate. We would want safety, right? We would want security. We would want opportunity to take place. And then as we were meeting together, there would be some things that we would not want. We don't want people to be homeless. We don't want people to be so poor that they can't provide food for themselves and for their family. And see, I think when we come together, most of us say, I want shalom. There are things we all want, and there are things that we all do not want. But the question is, how do we get there? And that's where the conflict starts. How do we get there? Because all the conflict around this, even though we all want it, it is how do you get it? So here's the next question. The way you pursue it is, do you believe it is a goal or is it a reward? Don't answer. Is shalom basically mutual flourishing together? Is it a goal or is it a reward? It makes a big difference. If it is a goal, you develop structures. Okay, what structures do we need to help so that everyone flourishes? And they're external structures, because that's the only structures you can make, right? You can't make internal structures. They got to be external structures. So you do all sorts of things, and this usually becomes what government does. A lot of structures. Because so often when we see it as a goal, we see the best way to do it is through government that guides each and every one, and you start setting up structure after structure after structure on top of structure, trying to create a country or a community where everyone flourishes. But you know something? Governments have never been able to do it. Never. They can help. Think about Rome. Rome came when Rome was getting so big. Basically, say, let's just kind of at least change our goal to this. It was bread and the circus. Let's make sure people have bread, and they had the Colosseums, the circus, to entertain people. And so it did not create this where everyone flourished. When Nero was reigning over Rome, Rome was getting so bad, the city of Rome, that you had all the low income area, everything looked terrible. It didn't look good when you want to impress the rest of the world with Rome. So either he or he let it burn down and then blame the Christians. They just wanted to get rid of it all because it was showing their government could not do what their government promised. Now, I believe there's a reason to have government. I'm not anti-government. And I think some of these external things aren't bad. But it will never create a community that flourishes. We thought it. 120 years ago, we had a major change within this country. It affected everything we do. Even churches split over it, with externally trying to make that happen. But you can't make enough laws or regulations to force people to love your neighbor, because that's what it comes to. Because if we're all going to flourish, I have to love other people more than myself. See, I have to sacrifice to help other people, but then it should be mutual sacrifice, right? They should sacrifice to help my family, and everyone does this together. It doesn't work. You can't somehow externally make somebody disadvantage themselves to advantage the community. It's impossible. If you think this is politics, it's just skillful living. It's Proverbs. So therefore, this is not a goal, it's a reward. Because it doesn't work as a goal. We try and try and try. We do it all the time. That's what a lot of our taxes are for. It's a reward. And when you understand it, it's a reward that it starts as God is trying to tell us here. It starts by fearing God and keeping his commandments. And if you choose to live skillfully, to live God's way, it is an outflow. Other people benefit because of my walk with God. It's a reward. Because see, change, and there's a real good book that was written probably 30 years ago by Larry Crabb. It's called Real Change Takes Place from the Inside Out. Because see, that's where it has to happen. For me to change, I can know all of God's commands, but that's not wisdom. Wisdom is living it. It starts from the inside and it comes out within our lives. And that's what makes a difference. That's how communities, everyone can have shalom. It seems overwhelming. And so that's why we go as a goal. I will make it happen. Can't be done. It has to come from within. Where does it start? For me saying it, it starts with me. When you're saying it, it starts with you. That's where it starts. Because I can't say other people need to disadvantage themselves to advantage me. No, I can disadvantage myself to help other people. And that's why Jesus came from heaven. All authority, he gave his authority away. He came to earth, became man, became a servant, and died upon a cross. Did God reward him? Yes. The day will come that every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, okay, that Jesus Christ is Lord. It's from the inner. See, it has to start with us, in your home, in your workplace, in your school. And if we can't bring shalom into those environments, we can't make it happen anyplace else. And it is hard in those environments, because probably most of us have lived long enough. I can't make other people do what I want them to do. Okay? That's just the way it is. Even in the places that I am the closest to the people, I still can't make them do what would bring shalom. It's got to come from within. It starts with you. Love your neighbor as yourself. So those within those groups, in the home, in the workplace, in school, I have to care for. I have to care for. But remember that commandment when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest? And Jesus brought it back to the young ruler. He knew what it was. See, there's two parts. The first part is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind and strength. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. See, even if you love your neighbor, you cannot bring shalom. It starts with you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then that flows into the way you treat other people. See? And that's why it keeps trickling. And the reward goes further and further and further. You cannot have the second without the first. Because the first is the first command, to love the Lord our God. We can't just concentrate on the second, because shalom will not happen. Here's why, verse 3. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the table of your heart. So he's saying, get it where you can see it, because we need reminders, but you're trying to have it written on your heart. Kindness and truth. For you and I, when we read that in verse 3, it is pretty easy to just kindness and truth. And now I'm to verse 4. Because we're not Hebrew. Okay? For the Hebrews, they would have stopped. Oh, here's kindness and truth. We better stop here because this is big. Because those two words are key to God's covenant with them and their covenant to God. These are covenant terms, which means the relationship that God developed. These are relational. So whenever they see kindness and truth in Scripture, let's stop. Let's see what this is about. Because this is about our relationship with God and his relationship with us. These are covenant words. And so they're simple. Kindness just means love. Okay? Love that is commitment. Because see, the Hebrew wouldn't say, I love you because up here and I feel it in my heart. No, it's always, remember, wisdom is it's carried out. Okay? Love is a verb. Okay? We see it. So it means this aspect of kindness because it's covenant. I will be there for you. See, that's what God said to them. I will be there for you. I will rescue you. How many times did God rescue the Jewish people? Okay? I will show you favor. See, it is used by God, this word kindness, to show that relationship that he has with them. Basically, I will be there for you no matter what you go through, and that is my covenant. That's what God told them. And then the second word is truth, which means trust, being trustworthy, faithful. God is saying, I will keep my covenant. I will show you love, and I promise you I will keep that. Those two words are big. But they go together. And here's how. God made a covenant, and his covenant is, I will be there for you. I will walk with you. I will love you. I will be faithful to you. I will rescue you. I will take care of you. I will protect you. I will have your back. I will be there for you. I promise. And the only way for shalom to take place, for mutual flourishing, for us to keep that covenant with God, and then for us to make that covenant with others. That we will love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and we will love our neighbor as ourselves. I promise. And here's why. Because if I don't have God as number one, that usually means I'm number one. And if I'm worrying about all the things in my life, I will not have time for you. See, if I really believe we're in a dog-eat-dog situation, that there is no God, I'm just here to make it for myself and my family, I will never have time for somebody else. In fact, I will be very suspicious of anybody else because they're probably taking advantage of me. But if we will make that covenant with God, that God, here, I worship you. I know you will take care of me because you promised. I now have time for other people. If I know that God rewards me because of being faithful to him, when I do things like have the fruit of the Spirit in my life, when I follow the Beatitudes that God says he rewards, when I see God within that, I'm free to love my neighbor because I don't have to worry about myself anymore because God's taking care of me. See, we will not disadvantage ourselves for our community if we're looking out for ourselves. It's only when we put God first, we see I can disadvantage myself for the advantage of other people. And this is big. This is big, is what he's telling us here. And so the only way the formula works is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love your neighbor. So if we are in a nation that is drifting further and further from God, is shalom possible? No. Because even as a goal, you cannot put enough external structures in. You can't make enough laws and regulations to make someone love others. That's why it starts with putting God first. So what is the possibility of helping everyone flourish? It seems overwhelming. But it starts with chapter 1. What is the foundation? The fear of the Lord is the beginning, right? You fear the Lord. And that is our basis. That is our basis. So that's verses 2 and 3. 4 through 6, we're not doing all of them, so let's hold on. This will be what's supposed to be 3 minutes or so. It might be a little longer than that. So what are the results? So you find favor and good reputation in the sight of God and man. See the results when you do this? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Those 2 verses, I believe, are life verses because they're key. And when you just spend time in the first 3 chapters of Proverbs, you see these are key. The word trust is big. This word trust basically was used for prisoners and slaves. Because if you were the master, if you were the king, when a prisoner came into you, or if a slave came into you, they didn't come in and talk to you eye to eye. You didn't argue about how to take care of the pasture, okay? They came in and they laid flat with their head towards you, flat on the ground. Basically, they were saying to their master or their king, if you want to kill me, you can do it. Okay? They were totally vulnerable. And that's the idea within this word trust. When I say I trust God, I make myself totally vulnerable to God. But remember what Jesus said to the disciples? Okay, you're not my servants anymore, you're my friends, okay? Jesus says, get up and, okay, we're brothers together, okay? Because this is how good God is. But this is what trust is, that I will place everything before you. So either you can lop my head off, God, or you can rise me up and bless me. That's trust. That's the idea of trust that's being talked about here. God, I trust you. You can do whatever you want to with my life. The alternative is you lean on your own understanding. There's either you trust God or you lean on your own understanding. So that's what he says here. And chapter 1, week 1 we looked at, that is the idea of the foolish being a know-it-all. Okay, I will just lean on my own understanding. I know what to do. And so the fool says, I don't need somebody else to tell me what to do. I don't need somebody else to tell me how to live. I don't need God's commandments. I don't need anybody else's commandments. I know what to do, and I'm going to do what I please. It doesn't create shalom. Okay? So think about it this way. I lived 15 years. I've lived 20 years. I've lived 40 years or 50 years. Somebody's having a birthday today and has lived how many years? Quite a few years. Okay? And I've lived however many years here, and I'm so impressed with myself that I don't need the wisdom of God. And I can decide to do it myself. Saying, I'm not going to trust God. A God who created the universe. We were sitting out and looking at the stars the other night, and you just can't help but say, wow. And that's just how far we can see. Okay? And we're just seeing little dots. Okay? You go, wow. That I'm thinking I can take care of it all. And here's a God that through speaking can take care of everything. And I can't even keep the moles out of my yard. Okay? I have it all together. You know, I don't need God. He sees tomorrow. He sees yesterday. He sees everything since the beginning of time. And in my short lifetime, or in anyone's short lifetime, said, I'm just going to lean on my own understanding. Trust him. He knows what he's doing. We saw that night a few what we call falling stars. It's kind of neat. But think how many years they have been. We fight about that as people, but you know, they've been there a while and they don't collide and all that stuff. Isn't it neat how they orbit? Pretty cool. God knows what he's doing. So don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him. That's what it's saying here. We looked at last week, that's the idea of the path, the way. Okay? That word path and way is used over 100 times in Proverbs. It's used all the way through Scripture. Jesus talks about, I am the way, the truth, and life. He says, I'm the path. I'm the only way you can get to God. And so we see that God creates a lit path, a straight path for us to go on. Or there's the crooked path, which is the way of darkness, of misery, of frustration. The straight path, you get what your soul longs for. All souls long for the same thing. That's why we could come together as a community and say, this is what we want and don't want. It's just how do we get there? But the crooked path, you will never get what your soul desires. But you can lean on your own understanding. You can take the dark, crooked path. But why would you? When God has made the other way straight. It's a pathway. It's a pathway. The idea of skilled living, wisdom, is a path. Don't you wish it was a gate and not a path? That you could just open the gate and here I am, I have all wisdom and everything's good. It's a path. It's a journey. But we live in a culture that we want everything to be a gate, right? Why is this microwave taking so long, okay? 2 minutes, okay? All the things you can do in 2 minutes waiting on that microwave. We want to Google things. We want to go to a bookstore and say, this is 3 ways to have your life complete, okay? We want things instantly. But skillful living, wisdom, is not a gate you open and here you are. I wake up in the morning, a miracle happened, I am wise now. It's a pathway. A pathway you decide to get on because I am going to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the outflow is I will love my neighbor as myself. It's not a gate, it's a path, it's a journey that we travel down as we trust God. And at the end of life, as we look back, I think I can guarantee it's not the big moments in our life that define us. It's the everyday things that really define who we are. It's the step by step, day by day, because it's a journey that defines who we are. And it takes a high skill of learning how to live on that path. Verses 7 and 8, do not be wise in your own eyes. Don't be a know-it-all. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. That's the result. And it will be healing to your body and refreshment to your souls. Science even tells us that, right? That if we choose to live skillfully, usually it's easier on our bodies. Okay, that's what he's saying here. There's a reward. 9 and 10, honor the Lord with all your wealth, and he will give to you. Remember the last book in the Old Testament that they were farming more and more and getting less and less crop all the time, and God says, okay, why don't you just give to me what I told you to give, and just test me, and I will open up the windows of heaven, and you will receive the reward. That we are to be a wise steward. And this just goes into all sorts of different things. Because the list goes on, starting with verse 13. All the rewards. You will be happy, verse 13 says. In financial terms, verse 14, you will profit and gain. You will have better silver, better gold, better precious jewels. Verse 15, better anything you desire. Verse 16, long life, rich and honor. Verse 17, pleasure and shalom. Verse 18, life and happiness. Verse 22, life in your soul. 23, security. 24, you don't have to be afraid. In verse 25, again, it says you don't have to be afraid either. See, isn't this what our soul is longing for? These are the rewards. These are the things we want, but they are an outflow. They're not a goal that we can set structures how it works. It is an outflow that comes from the inside out. It's a reward of pursuing God and keeping his commandments. Here's another question. Why is it so hard to live that way? Because of our culture. Okay? We're living usually in cultures, Christians are, where you're swimming upstream, and that's hard. We have to remember the wisdom of God, though, is greater than the foolishness of man. Last couple thoughts. Okay? So hang in there with me. Because here's where it applies to Proverbs to us so much today. Think of Palm Sunday and Easter and Christmas. The first Palm Sunday we call the triumphal entry. Jesus came into Jerusalem and everyone is saying, hallelujah, Hosanna. Okay, this is great. By the end of the week, they found out Jesus wasn't going to give them what they wanted. See, self-centered, okay, selfish. And so by the end of the week, instead of rejoicing, they are saying, crucify him. Why? Because they had a different agenda. Their agenda was about themselves. And so what was happening looked like foolishness. Our wisdom says, ride in on a white horse with power and let's destroy Rome. And so it looked foolish. Think of the Christmas story. God of creation being born as a baby, okay, in a little tiny country that's not as big as this state, to a poor couple in a nowhere town of Bethlehem. But remember the Christmas story? Oh, there were shepherds, but remember, it could be up to 2 years later, these people came in. We sometimes call them kings because it fits well in a song. But they were wise men. Sometimes we say there were 3 because there were 3 gifts. Some believe there probably was maybe as many as 70. The wise men came because they probably had learned from the Jewish people when they were in Babylon about all these things from the book of Daniel. And so you could almost pinpoint when the Messiah was coming to this earth when you look at the book of Daniel. And so they came. They came looking. These are the wisest men of that time. They were probably the king builders. When a baby was born that was going to be king, they offered their services to teach that child how to be a king. And so they came seeking this one. But isn't it foolish? They came to a little town, to a baby, where when he was born, there was no room for him. He was born in a stable or a place for animals and laid in a manger where animals ate. But those were the true wise men. That they saw even the foolishness of God was wiser than what they were. That's the way we have to be. That even when God does things so simply, his foolishness is greater than any wisdom we will ever have. And that was the wise men. And so they came, and what did they do? When they came to this young child or this baby, they bowed down. The wisest of that day bowed down to the foolishness of God's simple little plan, because they knew this was big. Think about it this December. This December, thousands of people around the world will laugh at the notion how foolish it is that you could believe in a baby that was born in a manger. A man crucified on a cross that claimed to resurrect from the dead. How simple-minded, how naive, how foolish do you have to be to believe that? Next Easter, it will be the same thing. Many will laugh at the foolishness of the story about the resurrection of Jesus. But the Apostle Paul says this in Corinthians, which restates what the Proverbs is saying here. For the word of the cross is the foolishness of those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved is the power of God. It is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. Where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God. God was well pleased to the foolishness of his message preached to save those who believe. For indeed, Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Gentiles foolishness. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God, because the foolishness of God is wiser than man, and the weakness of God is stronger than man. See, to the world, the message of the birth and the resurrection is foolishness. It's ridiculous. How simple-minded and now naive do you have to be to believe that? But to the Christian, as Paul said, to those who believe, it is the power of God to salvation. We say it has changed our lives. And that's why, as Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, the good news of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. See, the wisdom of man bows to the foolishness of God. We can't even comprehend the wisdom of God. The foolishness of God, the smallness that God can make things, sometimes we stumble over it. Jesus said himself, as we end, as the worship team comes up, Jesus said this at the end of that great sermon. If you listen to me, Jesus said, and believe, you are like a wise man who builds his house on the rock, and when the storms of life come, you will endure. But if you don't listen to what I have to say, you are just a fool. And you will build your house on the sand, and when the storms of life come, your life will be washed away. As we started week 1 of Proverbs 1, the fear of the Lord is the beginning, the foundation of wisdom. It is a fool that despises wisdom and instruction. Let's stand together as we sing.